Lena Voss stepped into the vast chamber of the Interstellar Council, her boots echoing faintly against the polished obsidian floor. The air hummed with the low thrum of translation fields, carrying scents of alien incense and ionized metal that clung to her throat. She shouldn't be here, not like this, not bypassing the layers of envoys and preliminary hails that protocol demanded. But the human peace charter burned in her secure case, its words a fragile bridge she'd drafted in sleepless nights, offering trade pacts, shared tech, even territorial concessions. Unconditional, a gamble on reason over reflex. The chamber's tiers rose in a semicircle, seats filled with delegates from a dozen species, the scaled krell with their flickering gill lights, the ethereal vexari drifting in anti-grav pods, and the council's enforcers, hulking sentinels in armored exosuits lining the walls. At the apex loomed the dais of High Arbiter Thalkor, his elongated form draped in robes of shifting iridescence, eyes like polished voids scanning the assembly. Lena's heart hammered, but she forced her gaze steady. Her protege, Ryan, waited in the antechamber, his wide-eyed faith in her diplomacy, a weight she couldn't afford to drop. "I am Ambassador Lena Voss of United Human Territories," she announced, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. Protocol be damned. She'd demanded this slot through backchannel pleas, invoking emergency statutes. "I bring a charter of peace drafted without reservation. Humanity seeks alliance, not rivalry. Read it. Consider it." Murmurs rippled through the tiers, a wave of chittering and low-frequency rumbles. Thalkor's tendrils twitched, the only sign of surprise in his clinical poise. He leaned forward, holographic displays blooming around his dais like predatory blooms. "Ambassador Voss," he intoned, his voice a resonant baritone laced with theatrical gravity. "Your initiative is noted, but the Council deliberates on matters of equilibrium, not impulsive gestures. Present your document." Lena uploaded the charter via her wrist link, the file projecting in crisp hollows above the central pit. Clauses scrolled, mutual defense pacts, resource sharing, even human withdrawal from contested nebulae. Her idealism had poured into every line, bypassing the caution of her own High Council, who feared it made humans look weak. But weakness now meant extinction later. She watched the delegates' reactions. Some leaned in, intrigued, others scoffed, their bioluminescence dimming in disdain. Thalkor scanned the text, his void eyes unblinking. Lena felt exposed under that gaze, as if he dissected not just the words but her intent. She'd built her career on this. Dialogue over deadlock, legitimacy over force. If this failed, Ryan's future in envoy training crumbled, and her own naivety would be the indictment that justified whatever came next. "Esteemed Council," Thalkor declared, rising with fluid authority, "we convene a public vote on this human overture. Equilibrium demands clarity. Does humanity merit partnership or correction?" He gestured, and voting orbs materialized, glowing motes drifting to each delegate. Lena's pulse spiked. A public vote? This wasn't deliberation, it was theater, a spectacle to broadcast the rejection. The orbs pulsed as votes tallied. Krell delegates rejected first, their territorial grudges against human expansion too raw. Vexari abstained, ever the neutralists. One by one, the count tilted, 78% against. Lena's stomach knotted. Thalkor's tendrils curled in satisfaction as the final tally sealed it. "The charter is rejected," he proclaimed, his voice booming through amplifiers. "Humanity's offer disrupts the balance we safeguard. You have 14 days to surrender your fleets and colonies unconditionally. Resist, and the Council will enforce compliance." The chamber erupted in approving drones, but Lena heard only the finality in his tone, a clinical dismissal wrapped in pomp. She stood frozen as security drones escorted her out, the charter's hollow flickering to ash in the projection field. 14 days. Her idealism had just handed them the justification for war. High above the border system of Epsilon Vale, the Council cruiser Vindicator, decloaked with a ripple in the star field, its sleek hull gleaming like a predator's scale. Captain Alaris, Thalcor's chosen executor, monitored the deployment from the bridge. "Arrays to full spread," he ordered, his voice clipped. Orbital interdiction grids unfurled from the cruiser's bays, massive lattices of energy emitters and sensor webs, designed to choke traffic and enforce blockades without full assault. A second vessel mirrored the maneuver over the adjacent system of Thorn Drift, their signatures broadcasting Council authority. On the human side, colony alarms wailed as the arrays locked into geosync, their fields humming to life. Civilian ships grounded, ports sealed. It was a show of force, precise and overwhelming. Thalcor's philosophy in action, visible punishment to deter the upwardly ambitious. No blood yet, but the noose tightened. In the fortified bunkers of New Terra, the human High Council chamber thrummed with urgency. Hollow screens flickered with feeds from the Council rejection, Lena Voss's face pale in the replay. President Hale, lines etched deep from years of brinkmanship, slammed a fist on the table. 14 days. They're bluffing or testing us. We can't surrender everything. Admirals and ministers leaned in, voices overlapping in controlled chaos. Our fleets are outmatched in open war, one argued. Asymmetric tactics, guerrilla strikes, hidden bases. Hale's gaze settled on the tactical display. We evacuate who we can. Captain Kestrel, your squadron's up. Escort the first refugee convoy from Thorn Drift off-world. Get them to the outer rims before those arrays clamp down. Mara Kestrel, seated at the table's edge, nodded sharply. Her uniform felt too tight, the weight of command pressing like an ill-fitted harness. At 34, she'd risen through grit and loss. Her parents gone to a pirate raid she'd barely survived as a cadet. Now her destroyer Falcon's Wing carried not just crew, but Tessa, her 17-year-old sister, tucked into cryostasis as a civilian dependent. Duty had always been her anchor, rigid and unyielding, but it blurred the lines when Tessa's life hung in the balance. Failing her crew meant slaughter. Failing Tessa meant personal ruin. "Understood, Madam President," Mara said, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. "We'll punch through, coordinates locked for the convoy rendezvous." She rose, the room's tension coiling around her like smoke. No chest-thumping heroism, just the grim math of survival. Her crew trusted her to keep them breathing. She'd bend rules if needed, but never break them outright. Not yet. As the session dissolved into frantic planning, Mara strode to the comms relay, patching through to her ship. "Lieutenant Reyes, prep for immediate jump. We're herding civvies out of the fire." Deep in the orbital shipyards of Sol Forge, Jonah Reese wiped grease from his hands, staring at the blueprint sprawled across his workstation. The retrofit orders had come encrypted, marked urgent from high command. Arm the light frigates with plasma lances and stealth disruptors, modules banned under the old accords for their indiscriminate yield. Jonah's stomach twisted. He was no soldier, just the chief strategist who'd clawed humanity's tech edge from scraps, motivated by the cold logic of survival. But his flaw gnawed. He'd greenlight compromises that saved lives today, but stained souls tomorrow. His partner, Cade, leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed. "They're really doing it. Banned tech on refugee escorts." Jonah nodded, rerouting power schematics on his holopad. "Orders are clear. Thalcor's arrays will shred anything conventional. We need the edge." Cade's eyes held that quiet judgment. Cade, the moral compass Jonah leaned on when his calculations got too ruthless. The team nearby, engineers he'd handpicked for their ingenuity, watched him, trust fragile as hull plating. One wrong call, and he'd be the war criminal architecting humanity's fall. He activated the fab bots, the machines whirring to life as they began welding the offensive modules onto the frigate hulls. "It's calculated," Jonah muttered more to himself. "Save the convoy, buy time, but if we use these—" His voice trailed, the fear coiled, his inventions turning him into the monster, conscience eroded by necessity. Mara's destroyer Falcon's Wing dropped out of jump space near Thorn Drift, the refugee convoy already forming, a ragged cluster of haulers, shuttles, and civi transports, loaded with families fleeing the interdiction shadow. Alarms pinged softly on the bridge, array signatures blooming on sensors, the council's grids powering up like a noose cinching tight. "Status, Reyes?" Mara asked, eyes locked on the main hollow. "Convoy's green, Captain. 23 vessels, mostly civi transponders. But that array, it's aligning on our vector. Full power in 60 seconds. Mara's jaw tightened. Tessa's face flashed in her mind, pale, trusting, stowed in the medbay. Her duty demanded she shield them all, but rigid protocol screamed for evasive routing, not the aggressive punch-through her gut urged. "Helm, plot the retrofit boost. We're not skirting. We're breaking lane." The crew exchanged glances, camaraderie forged in drills, now tested under real fire. No bravado, just the shared grit of humans against the void. Engines thrummed as the Falcon's Wing surged forward, frigates fanning out in loose wedge. The array's emitters glowed on scans, a web of death ready to ignite. Then the transponders winked. One by one, civilian signatures on the trailing haulers went dark, cut off, silent. Mara leaned forward, breath catching. "What the hell?" "Arrays firing selective bursts," Reyes reported, voice edged with ice. "They're targeting the civis, signatures gone cold." The bridge fell silent, the weight of it slamming home. Not a bluff. Thalcor's show of force had teeth, and the convoy was bleeding. Mara gripped the console, defiance hardening in her chest. Earned, not shouted. "All ships, offensive pattern. We hit that array now or no one gets out." Mara's fingers flew across the tactical holoscreen, redrawing the convoy's vector in jagged strokes. The interdiction arrays blinked like predator eyes on the display. Council tech woven into the asteroid belts like invisible nets. One wrong twitch and they'd snag the whole fleet, dragging them into a kill zone. "Helm, plot the slingshot around Gamma 7, she said, voice steady as plasteel. "We're threading the needle. No heroics, just survival." Lieutenant Reyes at navigation glanced up, sweat beading on his brow. "Captain, that's tight. Micro jumps in this debris field. Engines might fry." "Will they hold?" Mara met his eyes, no room for doubt. Her crew was her line in the void. She'd drag them through hell if it kept Tessa's shuttle in one piece. Reyes nodded, jaw set. "For one burst, yeah, but it's a gamble. Every second out here's a gamble." She keyed the fleet-wide comm. "All vessels, execute evasion alpha. Sink on my mark. We punch through or we don't punch at all." The bridge hummed with tension, consoles flickering as the convoy, 50-odd ships, haulers bloated with civilians and supplies, shifted formation. Mara watched the sim run in her mind. Skirt the arrays. Use the gravity well of the nearest rock to slingshot. Then a micro-jump to slip the noose. It bought time, maybe hours, before Thalcor's hunters closed in. Her gut twisted at the thought of her sister out there. Tessa's medical shuttle tucked amid the escorts. The girl had insisted on coming, patching wounds from the last skirmish. Mara had let her because saying no meant admitting the war was already lost. "Mark," Mara barked. The deck shuddered as thrusters fired, the fleet arcing into the debris shadow. Alarms wailed, proximity alerts from drifting hulks. But they held. Then the jump, a stomach-lurching warp, space folding like wet cloth. Reality snapped back, stars streaking past viewports. Clean. For now. "Array's blind," Reyes reported, exhaling. "We've got a window." Mara allowed herself a breath, but it caught sharp. Scans lit up. Secondary signatures faint but closing. Drones, Council's relentless little bastards. Evasive only. Keep formation tight. Far across the system, in the dim-lit chambers of the human diplomatic outpost, on Epsilon Station, Ambassador Lena Voss paced the comm room. The air recyclers hummed too loud, masking the tremor in her hands. Her peace offer, hours of negotiation, concessions on colony rights, shared tech, lay shattered by Thalkor's broadcast rejection. Subjugation or annihilation, he'd called it, his voice like oiled venom. Lena's idealism had built this bridge. Now it burned. She activated the private channel, a backdoor link to Delegate Vexar, one of the Council's wavering voices, an avian species with a history of bucking hegemony. If anyone might listen, it was him. The hologram flickered to life, Vexar's feathered crest flattening in unease. "Ambassador Voss," he said, his beak clicking softly. "This channel is monitored. Speak quickly." Lena leaned in, words measured. "Vexar, Thalkor's pushing slaughter. Our convoys under fire, civilians, not soldiers. Your Council's drones are carving them up. Call it off. There's still time for terms." His eyes darted, shadows playing across his scaled face. "Terms? Your humans fired first on the perimeter arrays. The Arbiter's dossier proves it. Aggressors hiding behind peace banners." Lena's stomach dropped. "That's a lie. We defended—" The feed glitched, then stabilized as a data packet shoved through the dossier. Hollow images scrolled, fabricated logs of human ships, provoking patrols, edited vids of colony strikes pinned on her people, propaganda thick as void tar, framing humanity as the spark that ignited the war. Lena's breath hitched. This would poison any dissent in the Council. Vexar shook his head, crest drooping. "See, the evidence is irrefutable. Thalkor moves to protect the balance. Your offer was a ploy, Voss. We're ending this." The channel died. Lena slammed her fist on the console, the sting grounding her. Rian, her protégé, hovered in the doorway, young face pale. "Ma'am, what now?" "Now we fight the lies," Lena said, voice cracking, but doubt gnawed. Her naivety had handed them the narrative. If the Council painted humans as monsters, her legitimacy crumbled, and Ryan's wide eyes reminded her, one wrong step and she'd drag him into the abyss. Deep in the bowels of the Resistance frigate Endurance, Jonah Reese hunched over the engineering bay's workbench. Sparks flying from his arc welder. The air stank of ozone and sweat. His team's murmurs a low buzz around him. Cade, his partner, handed over a Council drone fragment, salvaged from the last hit, its interdiction core still humming faintly. "Signatures are layered," Jonah muttered, prying open the casing. His mind raced, piecing the puzzle. The arrays didn't just block jumps. They predicted them, adaptive algorithms sniffing out human patterns. Flaw of his own, always chasing the tech fix, even if it meant bending lines he shouldn't. But survival demanded it. Cade's hand brushed his shoulder, a quiet anchor. "Got a lock on the modulation," Jonah said, screens blooming with code. Reverse engineering the signatures wasn't pretty. Hacking their predictive net required mimicking Council pulses. A moral gray zone that could flag human ships as hostile. But it was a door. He straightened, calling the team, "Huddle." 5 engineers, faces grimed, leaned in. "Listen up. We crack this. We ghost their arrays. No more blind jumps. But here's the play. Targeted strikes. Hit the node relays, the military brains, before they choke civilian lanes. Precision, not carpet bombs, saves lives, buys us ground. Sasha, the wiry signals tech, frowned. Council's nodes are shielded, and if we miss, blowback on the convoys. Jonah met her gaze, conscience twisting. We adapt. Human ingenuity, make do with what we've got. But yeah, risks there. My call. Cade's eyes held steady, trusting. But Jonah felt the weight. One compromise too far, and he'd be the monster engineering the war. The team nodded, diving back in. Jonah wiped his brow. The hum of tools, a fragile rhythm. His inventions could turn the tide, or brand him a criminal when the dust settled. Back on the Vanguard's bridge, the altered route held for an agonizing hour. Mara monitored the scopes, every ping a potential doom. The convoy stretched like a wounded serpent, haulers groaning under G-force. Then the alert screamed, drone squadrons, a swarm of glinting hornets materializing from the black. Incoming bearing 047, Reyes shouted. They're vectoring the logistics hub. Mara's blood iced. The hub, a cluster of supply tenders. Tessa's shuttle docked there for resupply. Shields up, escorts, intercept. Too late. The drones hit like a storm, plasma lances carving through the hub's flanks. Explosions bloomed silent in the void, debris blooming in slow blooms. Mara's world narrowed to the feed, a shelter pod rupturing, figures tumbling. Tessa. No, Mara whispered, lunging for the comm. Tessa, evac, now! Static, the hub crumpled, a final flare as the core breached. Scans confirmed, no survivors from that section. Her sister, gone. The girl who'd bandaged her scrapes as kids, who'd begged to join the fleet to help fix things, crushed under Council's boot. Reyes's voice cracked. Captain, hubs slagged, drones breaking off. Mara stood frozen, grief a blade in her ribs. Duty warred with the void in her chest, rigid orders that kept the rest alive. But at what cost? She gripped the console, knuckles white. Reform the line. We push on. Word of the hit rippled through human channels, fracturing the fragile unity. On the secure political net from Earth Command, debates raged. Lena watched from her outpost, feeds alive with hardliners, generals and colony reps, scarred by border losses, pushing back against the defensive stance. We bleed while they dictate, Admiral Hale barked in the holo conference, his face a map of old burns. Defensive orders are suicide. Authorize probes, hit their flanks, make 'em flinch. Lena interjected, voice sharp. Probes mean escalation. Thalcor wants justification. And we're giving it by cowering, Hale snapped. The vote split. Moderates like Lena's allies held for restraint, but the hardliner bloc, fueled by the hub's destruction, carried it. Limited offensives greenlit, Mara's defensive standing orders. Overridden, the directive beamed out, unauthorized by the full council but binding in crisis. Lena's protests echoed unheard, her idealism sidelined as fear won. Aboard the Vanguard, Mara's console chimed, priority flash, encrypted from the block. She opened it, eyes scanning the text. Pursue an incoming council courier ship, it read. Intel suggests it's carrying Thalcor's subjugation edicts. Intercept, destroy. Priority Alpha. Her breath caught. The courier's vector crossed their path, but chasing it meant peeling off escorts. The convoy, battered, limping, would be left exposed. Abandon them? After Tessa? Reyes leaned over. Captain, that's a hard turn. Mara stared at the plot, the weight crashing down. Defiance burned, earned in blood and loss. But this? It cracked her rigid world. Protect the crew or strike back. The hardliner's order hung like a noose, promising survival at the price of her soul. The bridge waited, air thick as the courier's blip grew closer. Mara's fingers tightened on the armrest. the tactical plot flickering like a dying star before her. The courier's blip inched closer, a lone insect in the void, but it carried the Council's venom. Her bridge crew shifted uneasily, the hum of the eagle's talon, a low growl under their feet. Tessa's face flashed in her mind, her sister tucked away in the civilian decks below, oblivious to the noose tightening. Protect the crew. That was the oath, etched in every scar from the border skirmishes. But the hardliners' withdrawal order clawed at her gut, a surrender disguised as strategy. Captain Ensign Ruiz broke the silence, his voice steady but edged. Incoming transmission from Admiral Halv's flagship, Priority Alpha. Sarah Halv, Mara's old mentor, the one who drilled tactics into her during the academy drills. Voice like gravel over synth coffee. What now? Mara nodded and the hollow flickered to life. Sarah's face filled the display, lined and weary, eyes hollowed by whatever ghosts haunted her these days. Mara, Sarah said, no preamble. This is it. The Council's offered terms. Full integration. I can't watch more blood spilled for nothing. The words hit like a hull breach. Integration? Subjugation, more like. Mara's jaw clenched. Admiral, the peace offer was a feint, Sarah cut in, her gaze sliding away. They've got the codes, fleet access. I'm facilitating. A pause, heavy as vacuum. For the survivors. The transmission spiked, data packets flooding the net. Access codes. Mara's console lit up in red. Overrides ripping through the fleet's encryption. Betrayal, raw and personal. Sarah's image glitched. Then the Admiral's shuttle detached from her flagship, vectoring hard toward Council lines. Desertion. The woman who'd taught her to fight dirty now handing the knife to the enemy. Alarm screamed. Ambush inbound, Ruiz shouted. The plot erupted, Council corvettes materializing from stealth, nanonets deploying like spiderwebs. 3 human frigates, the Vanguard's pickets, caught flat-footed. Torpedoes bloomed, silent in the black, slamming into hulls. The Resolute vented atmosphere in a silver plume, crew pods ejecting like scattered seeds. Mara watched a frigate crumple, its spine snapping under plasma fire. 200 souls gone in seconds. Withdrawal order confirmed, the comms officer relayed, voice cracking. All ships fall back to Rally Point Delta. Captain, we have to... No. The word escaped before Mara could cage it. Her crew stared, the rift opening right there on the bridge. Protect the crew meant all of them, not just the ones who ran. Helm, divert course, we're pulling survivors, launch recovery drones. Captain, that's direct disobedience, Ruiz protested, but his hands were already moving, loyalty overriding protocol. The Talon banked hard, engines flaring as it plunged toward the wreckage. Mara felt the deck shudder, the ship protesting the strain. In her earpiece, the human council commander's channel boiled over. Furious demands, threats of court-martial. She'd broken the chain, splintered command for a handful of pods drifting in the debris field. Lasers stitched the void as council hunters closed in, but Mara's mind narrowed to the pings. Life signs, faint and fading. One drone snagged a pod, reeling it in. Another exploded under fire. She gripped the console, sweat beading despite the chill. This was the cost. Her career, her reputation, traded for faces she might never know. But Tessa's safety, the crew's trust, that held. Hours blurred into a tense extraction, the Talon dancing on the edge of the kill zone. They saved 87, not enough. As the last pod clamped to the hull, Mara slumped, the weight of fractured orders settling like shrapnel in her chest. Down in engineering, Jonah Reese wiped grease from his hands, the experimental rig humming behind him like a caged beast. The air reeked of ozone and solder, his team's faces gaunt under the work lights. Cade, his partner, leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, eyes sharp with that unspoken worry. How far would Jonah bend before he broke? "It's ready," Jonah said, voice low, as Mara and a skeleton security detail filed in. He'd pulled all-nighters tweaking the nano-disruptor, a beast of human ingenuity, a pulse emitter tuned to shred council synchronization nets, the invisible webs that let their fleets coordinate like a single mind. One hit, and their command structure would fracture, ships blind and isolated. Mara's eyes narrowed, still raw from the rescue. "Show me." Jonah patched the schematic to the overhead display. The device pulsed in simulation, waves collapsing the nanolinks. Decapitation potential, target Thalcor's flagship, and the Council's high command goes dark, but... He hesitated, the flaw in his design gnawing. Calculated compromise, his shadow always lurking. Activation overloads adjacent relays. Civilian comms in the sector, colonies, outposts, they'll fry. Blackout for weeks. Panic. Isolation. People die without medevac or supply lines. Cage shifted, silent accusation in his stance. Jonah met Mara's gaze, unflinching. His motive burned clear. Survival, whatever the toll. But the fear coiled tight, his hands building the noose for innocence, turning him into the monster the Council painted. Mara's face hardened, the rescue's defiance still fresh. "How many?" "Thousands, indirect. But it buys us the strike. Ends this before more frigates burn." The door hissed open again. Lena Voss striding in, her diplomatic robes rumpled, face ashen. She'd come straight from the comms deck, where the Council's broadcast had hit like a gut punch. Jonah's revelation hung in the air as Lena activated the hollow unit, her hands trembling slightly. The feed looped, Thalcor's theatrical sneer filling the frame, his clinical voice dissecting her peace offer like a cadaver. "Human Ambassador Voss," the High Arbiter intoned, "your so-called overtures were aggression veiled as olive branches, orchestrated incursions mapped for conquest. The Council rejects subjugation. We impose order." Lena's idealism cracked under the weight, her protege Ryan's face flashing in her mind. Ryan, the young envoy who'd believed in her vision, now gone. The diplomatic convoy had stopped at a neutral relay for refueling, standard protocol, but Council agents had swarmed, abduction swift, no shots fired. Lena had watched the security feed, Ryan dragged into a shuttle, eyes wide with betrayal. Her political capital shattered, allies whispering of naivety, of war crimes pinned on her diplomacy. "I didn't orchestrate shit," Lena muttered, killing the feed. Her flaw stared back, bypassing caution for hope, now fracturing everything. She cared for Ryan like a daughter, the legitimacy of her efforts crumbling. Prosecution loomed, her actions twisted to justify the Council's boot. Mara crossed her arms, the rift from her disobedience echoing in the tension. "They've been playing us. The courier..." As if summoned, the security chief burst in, dragging a bound figure. The captured Council courier, hood yanked back to reveal a wiry alien with flickering implant eyes. "Talked under truth serum," the chief grunted, "whole op laid bare." Jonah leaned in as the data spilled onto the display, logs, timestamps. The peace offer, Lena's masterstroke, vetted and recorded not for reconciliation but as bait. Council probes had infiltrated the transmissions, mapping human defenses, fleet positions, relay weak points, even civilian evac routes. A strategic trap, Thalcor's philosophy in action: punish the upward species, maintain hegemony through visible dominance. No acceptance, only the illusion to lure them out. Lena's breath hitched, grief for Ryan twisting into rage. They used my words as weapons, recorded every concession to justify this slaughter. Mara's defiance, earned in the debris field, flared. The crew she'd saved, 87 lives, demanded more than retreat. But the cost, her rigid duty warred with the moral mud. Jonah watched them both, the disruptor rig thrumming behind him like a heartbeat, his team's eyes on him, Cade's silent plea. Compromise had gotten them this far, but this? He cleared his throat, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. Captain, Ambassador, it's time. Authorize the weapon. We use it for a decapitation strike, Thalcor's command net. Collapse it all, but we need a diversion. Sacrifice a neutral colony's relays to mask the pulse, draw their eyes, hit from the shadows. The words landed heavy, the hook sinking deep. Mara's world cracked further. Protect her crew or doom strangers for the blow. Lena's idealism recoiled, Ryan's abduction a fresh wound, her legitimacy hanging by this thread. Jonah felt the fear rise, his inventions branding him criminal, conscience fraying. The engineering bay fell silent, the war's brutal clarity etching lines on their faces. Outside, the void waited, indifferent to choices that would scar them all. The engineering bay's hum faded to a low throb, the air thick with the scent of overheated circuits and stale sweat. Jonah Reese wiped his brow, his fingers leaving a smear of grease on his skin. Around the holographic table, the human commanders stood like statues carved from exhaustion. Captain Mara Kestrel with her jaw set, Ambassador Lena Voss clutching a data slate, and the fleet admirals, their faces shadowed by the blue glow of schematics. The plan hung between them, Jonah's brainchild. Stealth pods slipping through the Council's outer defenses to seed a synchronization collapse, while Mara's strike fleet hammered the heart of their seat on Epsilon Prime. It wasn't glory, it was survival, pieced together from scavenged tech and desperate math. Mara broke the silence first, her voice steady but edged with the weight of command. We've run the sims. The pods give us a 30-second window before their grid locks us out. Fleet hits the seat hard and fast. No lingering. Her eyes flicked to Jonah, a silent question about the weapon's core, the pulse emitter that would fry the Council's neural links without glassing the planet. Admiral Halv, broad-shouldered and scarred from older wars, leaned forward, his breath fogging the hollow display. And if the pods fail, we're exposed in that corridor, mined to hell and back. His gaze hardened on Jonah. This engineer's toy better not be another compromise we regret. Jonah met it without flinching, though his gut twisted. He'd built the emitter to target only the Council's command nodes, sparing civilians, but every weapon carried echoes. It won't fail if we time it right. The collapse buys us the breach. He tapped the projection, watching virtual pods bloom like ink in water. His motive burned clear, keep his team alive, keep Cade safe. But the flaw gnawed. Each tweak to the design bent his morals a little further, trading ethics for edges. Lena stepped up, her diplomat's poise cracking just enough to show the fear beneath. The Council's moderates are fracturing. I've got contacts. 2 delegates who see Thalcor's rejection as madness. We strike now, we might force a real peace after. Her idealism had crafted the original offer, now ashes, but it blinded her to the risks of backroom deals. She cared for Ryan, her young envoy, left behind on a neutral station. Losing diplomatic ground meant losing him to the fallout. The vote came quick, voices overlapping in the dim light. Mara, I for her crew and Tessa's fragile hope back on the colony ships. Lena, I clinging to concessions that might rebuild legitimacy. Have, reluctant I, his loyalty to the chain fraying. Jonah nodded as the consensus sealed it, but inside, doubt coiled. The void outside didn't care. It would swallow them all the same. Lena Voss slipped through the shadowed corridors of the neutral station orbiting Vega's edge, her cloak humming with a jury-rigged jammer to blur her biometrics. The air recyclers wheezed, carrying the faint tang of alien spices from the docking bays. reminders that this hub teemed with species who'd chosen sides or none at all. Her heart hammered as she approached the private alcove, a neutral zone lounge where deals died or bloomed in whispers. Delegate Siraveth waited, her iridescent scales shifting under the low lights, flanked by Delegate Corin, whose feathered crest twitched with unease. They were moderates in Thalcor's ironclad council, voices drowned by the High Arbiter's theater of dominance. Lena slid into the booth, her voice low. "You know why I'm here. Thalcor's rejected peace. He's mobilizing for subjugation. Give us a window, reroute a patrol frigate for 15 minutes, and humanity offers concessions post-strike, trade rights, colony shares, no hegemony games." Siraveth's eyes narrowed, clinical as a scalpel. "Illicit aid to aggressors? Thalcor brands you terrorists already." But her motive flickered. Preserve the Council's balance without Thalcor's purges. Corin leaned in, his voice a rasp. "We delay the grid sync by that margin. In exchange, you withdraw from the outer rims. No more asymmetric raids." His flaw showed. Caution bordering on cowardice, fearing the High Arbiter's selective annihilations. Lena's idealism surged, but caution whispered of prosecution, of Ryan's face if her naivety ignited wider war. "Agreed, but if this leaks, we're all ghosts." They clasped palms over the table, a binding pulse of light sealing the deal. As she slipped away, the station's hum felt heavier, the concessions a chain around her neck. One narrow window bought with future debts. Captain Mara Kestrel gripped the command rail of the Vanguard, her knuckles white against the vibrating deck. The strike fleet, 8 frigates and a carrier, threaded the mined corridor like a needle through barbed wire. Alarms chirped softly, mapping the drifting ordnance. Council mines, dormant spheres laced with plasma charges, their fields overlapping in a lethal web. Mara's mind raced through tactics, human ingenuity against the odds, plotting vectors that no AI could match without emotion's edge. "Pods away," she ordered, her voice cutting the bridge tension. Jonah's stealth units launched silent, vanishing into the black toward the sync nodes. Her crew moved like extensions of her will. Ensign Rao at nav, plotting micro-jumps, Chief Tate barking fire solutions. But Admiral Halv's voice crackled over comms from the trailing wing, laced with doubt. "Steady through the choke, Kestrel, no heroics." The corridor narrowed, minds pulsing closer. Sensors screamed a patrol ambush, 3 Council interceptors blooming from shadow. Mara's flaw ignited, rigid duty demanding she protect every soul under her, even if it meant bending the plan. "Flank left, Rao, burn the engines, cut through the outer drift." It was reckless, shaving seconds off safe passage, threading hulls through a mine cluster that could shred them. Halv's response was ice. "Negative, that's suicide, fall back to formation." But Mara pushed, the Vanguard twisting like a blade. Explosions bloomed silent in the void, one mine grazing their shields in a shower of sparks. Her fleet punched through, interceptors scattering, but Halv's loyalists peeled off, their signatures fading from the grid. "You're on your own, Kestrel," his comm spat. "Madness like that severs us all." Pain lanced her chest, not just the rift, but the cost. Her crew glanced her way, loyalty holding, but Tessa's face flashed in her mind. The sister she couldn't fail. The seat loomed ahead, Epsilon Prime's spires glinting like teeth. Defiance earned in fire, but at what fracture? Deep in the Vanguard's auxiliary bay, Jonah worked by lamplight, his tools dancing over the emitter's core. Cade hovered nearby, his partner's steady hands passing circuits, their unspoken bond a anchor in the chaos. Jonah's motive drove him, engineer survival, keep Cade from the front lines. But the flaw loomed, moral compromises piling like debt. He wired the failsafe last, a manual data key slotted into the activation platform. No remote arming, he muttered, voice rough. Needs a human in the loop. Your key, Cade. Biometric lock. We don't fire blind. It was his refusal, etched in code. No unmanned slaughter, no turning his invention into Thalshor's mirror. Cade nodded, slipping the key into his suit pouch, his eyes holding Jonah's with quiet understanding. Smart, keeps us accountable. But Jonah saw the fear there, the trust that could shatter if his compromises broke them. The bay shuddered as the fleet accelerated, the strike closing in. Jonah sealed the panel, the weight settling, one key, one life, to pull the trigger. The breach hit like thunder without sound. Mara's fleet slammed into Epsilon Prime's outer defenses, railguns spitting kinetic fury. Pods detonated in sync, the Council's grid fracturing, neural links screaming as synchronization collapsed. Jonah monitored from the bay, heart pounding as the emitter fed data. Nodes going dark, one by one. Surgical, Mara whispered on the bridge, watching the Vanguard's torpedoes carve through the seat's shields. The central spire buckled, explosions blooming in precise fury. But then alerts wailed. The shockwave rippled outward, a unintended cascade from the emitter's pulse. Neighboring grids overloaded, and on the adjacent neutral colony of Lyrith, habitats crumpled. Feeds flooded in, collapsing domes, screams cut short, civilians of a dozen species buried in rubble. God, no! Jonah breathed, staring at the hollow. Casualties scrolled, thousands, unintended. The shockwaves echoed, turning precision into carnage. International channels ignited, condemnation from fringe worlds, accusations of human barbarism. Thalkor's voice boomed across open bands, theatrical and venomous. See the primitive savagery. The Council endures, they invite their own chains. Mara's bridge fell grim, her orders turning to damage control as Halv's splinter fleet broadcasted distance. Lena's comm patched in, frantic from the station. The deal held, but the moderates are pulling back. Condemnations everywhere. We're painted as monsters. Jonah pushed to the platform, the emitter's core still hot. He ran diagnostics, fingers flying, but the readout froze him. The failsafe, to shut it down, contain the cascade, required a human presence aboard the activation platform, his biometric signature locked in during rigging. No remote override. Evac time, seconds, the platform detaching into the fray. Cade! Jonah yelled, but his partner was already moving, key in hand. The void pressed in, indifferent, no time to pull out. The choice scarred before it landed. Jonah's shout echoed uselessly in the cramped engineering bay, the word Cade twisting into a rasp against the hum of failing stabilizers. His partner didn't turn, fingers already dancing over the console. The key, a slim data spike etched with fractal code, sliding into the port with a click that Jonah felt in his gut. The void outside the hull pressed closer, stars blurring into smears as the colony's orbital defenses faltered. No time to pull out. The choice scarred before it landed. He lunged forward, boots scraping the grated deck, heart slamming against his ribs like a malfunctioning piston. Give it here, Jonah said, voice steady despite the burn in his throat. Cade's eyes flicked up, wide and shadowed under the flickering emergency lights. But he didn't argue. They never did in moments like this. Trust was the only glue holding their team together through the endless grind of sabotage runs and retrofit hacks. Cade yanked the spike free and slapped it into Jonah's palm. You're sure? Jonah nodded, the weight of it cold and final. He'd designed this sequence himself. The collapse initiator, a weapon born from scavenged council tech and human desperation. It would unravel the neutral colony's core reactor, a chain reaction that would swallow the Council's forward command nexus whole. No heroes in the schematics, just physics. Implosion, then silence. But someone had to stand on the platform, transmit the final override, and ride the wave out. "I volunteer," Jonah said, the words tasting like ash. He stepped past Cade, onto the activation platform at the bay's heart, a raised dais ringed by conduits pulsing with stolen energy. His suit's seals hissed as he locked in, the harness clamping down like an accusation. Motive burned clear. Keep the fleet breathing, give Mara and her squadrons the window they needed. Flaw twisted in. This compromise, this calculated erasure of a neutral world, would haunt him if he survived. But survival first. Always. Cade hovered at the edge, face pale against the red glow. "Jonah, go, seal the bay behind you." Jonah slotted the key into his gauntlet's interface, neural link firing up with a jolt that spiderwebbed pain across his temples. Data flooded in. Reactor schematics, override codes, the colony's fragile web of habitats and shipyards now a pawn in the Council's game. He transmitted the sequence, fingers blurring over holographic controls, initiating the cascade. Alarms wailed, the deck shuddering as the platform's emitters charged. The first tremor hit like a gut punch, bulkheads groaning. Jonah's vision narrowed to the console, the key's light pulsing green. "Activate." He slammed the final command, and the world inverted. Energy surged through him, a white-hot torrent that fried nerves and seared code into his mind. The detonation bloomed, not fire, but a crushing implosion, the colony's heart folding in on itself. Jonah's last thought was of Cade's hand brushing his shoulder earlier that shift, a quiet promise amid the war's grind. Then nothing. The void claimed him, indifferent. High Arbiter Thalcor stood at the heart of the command nexus, his elongated form silhouetted against the panoramic viewport of the colony's central spire. The chamber thrummed with the Council's unyielding efficiency. Aides relaying fleet positions in clipped bursts, holographic displays flickering with human skirmish reports. He savored the theater of it. The way his voice, modulated through vocal amplifiers, carried the weight of epochs. "The human offer was a feint," he intoned to the assembled delegates, his multifaceted eyes reflecting their unease. "Subjugation preserves the balance. Selective annihilation deters the upstarts." A ripple passed through the ranks, subtle but there. Thalcor's philosophy demanded it. Visible punishment for species daring ascent. Yet the humans' asymmetric strikes had gnawed at the edges, their ingenuity a persistent itch. He turned to the primary console, where the Nexus AI coordinated the fleet's cohesion. "Status on the peace rejection broadcast?" "Transmitted, Arbiter," the AI replied, its voice a neutral chime. "Human vessels retreating to outer markers." Thalcor allowed a thin smile, clinical, but then the alarms pierced the air, a discordant shriek that shattered the calm. The deck bucked beneath him, lights stuttering as structural integrity warnings flooded the displays. "What is this?" he demanded, tentacles coiling in irritation. "Reactor breach," an aide stammered, scales paling, cascade failure, implosion imminent. Impossible. The colony was neutral, fortified against such crude sabotage. Thalcor's mind raced through contingencies, his motive unyielding. Maintain hegemony, or the Council fractured under the weight of doubt. But the chamber devolved into chaos, delegates shouting, consoles sparking as power diverted to failing shields. The viewport cracked, stars warping as the spire groaned. "Evacuate the leadership," Thalcor ordered, but his voice cut off in a rumble. Human ingenuity. They'd turned the neutral ground into a grave. Security forces swarmed, dragging him toward an escape pod as the Nexus's command links severed one by one. Cohesion crumbled, fleet signals fragmented without the central hub. Thalcor twisted in their grip, rage, clinical no longer. Captured alive, they'd ensure that, parading his fall to fracture the rest. The pod sealed, blasting free as the colony collapsed in a silent bloom of debris. From the viewport, he watched the council's seat dissolve, leadership scattering like chaff. Strategic victory for the humans, bought with neutral blood. His philosophy curdled, punishment, yes, but whose now? Lena Voss paced the dim-lit conference room aboard the human diplomatic shuttle, the weight of the transmission readout pressing on her chest like a stone. The colony's destruction scrolled across her tablet. Reactor implosion confirmed. Jonah's signature on the final code. She stopped, hand to her mouth, idealism fracturing against the reality. Her peace offer, hours of negotiation, clauses painstakingly woven, rejected by Thalkor's broadcast just before the strike. Now this, Rian, her protege, stood by the viewport, young face etched with the same hollow shock. They did it, he whispered, the fleet's breaking through. But Lena saw the cost. Global feeds already lit up. Condemnation from allied worlds, human polities fracturing under the backlash, destroying a neutral colony. It delegitimized everything, her diplomacy, the fragile legitimacy she'd clawed for. Motive clear, end the hostility, preserve lives through words, not weapons. Flaw biting deep. That idealism had blinded her to the Council's intransigence, and now her naivety would be weaponized against them all. A chime interrupted, urgent from the fleet command. Mara's voice, clipped and raw. Ambassador, it's done. Council's nexus is dust. Thalkor's in custody, but the fallout, it's bad. Lena swallowed. I know. The tribunals are convening already. She glanced at Ryan, the boy who'd believed in her vision, and felt the loss of standing like a knife twist. Resignation was the only play. Step down to shield the process from a show trial. Let the vultures pick at her instead of the cause. Ryan, draft my statement. Full withdrawal from post, effective immediately. He nodded, but his eyes held accusation. Had her clauses in the charter been enough? As she sealed the resignation, the shuttle's comms buzzed with incoming indictments. War crimes, violation of neutral accords. Diplomatic standing evaporated, allies pulling back. Yet in the charter's surviving text, that one disputed line she'd fought for, the ambiguity on defensive escalations lingered like a ghost. A bargaining chip, perhaps, but at what price to her soul? Mara Kestrel gripped the command rail of the bridge, the stars steadying as her squadron punched through the debris field. The fleet had held, ingenuity against odds, jury-rigged shields and decoy swarms buying the seconds Jonah's collapse had gifted. Cheers erupted from the crew, ragged and real, camaraderie forged in the fire of near misses. But Mara's gaze fixed on the casualty list scrolling beside her. Tessa's name, third from the top, her sister caught in the crossfire of a council strafing run during the feint. She'd ordered the maneuver, rigid duty demanding the push. Now the cost tallied, Tessa gone, Mentor's faith shattered in a terse message. You chose the fleet over family, Captain. What remains? And the naive code that once guided her cracked wide open. Survival, yes, but at the expense of human law. Innocence smeared in neutral ash. Captain, her XO said, voice low, incoming from the rear guard. We've secured the perimeter. Thalkor's pod is docked, alive, as planned. Mara nodded, throat tight. The fleet had saved the species, carved a foothold from the Council's grip. But returning meant facing the tribunals, the condemnation for the colony's fall. She accepted it, the weight settling like scar tissue, duty's illusion broken, protection's price etched in loss. Set course for Sol relay, she said, and prep the crew for debrief. We've earned this breath, but it cost us everything. The bridge fell quiet, the camaraderie under fire turning to grim resolve. Mara turned from the viewport, Tessa's face lingering in her mind, a reminder that defiance was earned, never free. Humanity's envoys gathered in the shadowed halls of the Provisional Assembly, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen and unspoken accusations. The strategic victory echoed in secured lanes and fractured council fleets, Thalkor's capture splintering their leadership into rival factions. Survival secured, a foothold clawed from the void, but the reputational price bled through every channel. Open condemnation from neutral powers, human polities roiled by internal trials, the colony's destruction painted them as aggressors, law's guardians turned executioners. Lena moved through the corridors like a shadow, resignation fresh but not final. Moderate council delegates, those Thalkor's fall had emboldened, slipped messages through back channels. She met one in a sealed alcove, a wiry Zalari named Vren, his eyes darting. "The charter holds," he murmured, voice a hiss. "Your clause, the one on escalatory defense, disputed but intact." Lena's pulse quickened, idealism flickering amid the ruin. "And the pact?" Covert terms, recognition of human autonomy in exchange for reparations and Thalkor's trial, under joint oversight. But the human courts prepare indictments. Push too hard, and it's war crimes for all. She sealed the pact with the encrypted nod, the weight of lost standing a fair trade for this sliver of negotiation. Rian's faith in her, frayed but not broken, urged her on. As council chambers reconvened and human tribunals loomed, that disputed line in the surviving peace charter became the last bargaining chip. A fragile thread deciding if survival etched as salvation or branded as crime. The void watched, indifferent as choices scarred deeper,